at 10:30.
Now on BBC One at 10 o'clock, the news with Ben Brown.
Indonesia digs mass graves for victims of the earthquake and tsunami that have killed at least 800 people. This hotel is one of the devastated buildings. Rescue teams are searching for survivors, and our correspondent has reached the scene tonight.
This would have been a thriving fishing village, houses packed closely together next to shops, now reduced to rubble amongst it, cars smashed by the powerful waves.
There's growing desperation as power cuts plunge hospitals in the area into darkness.
What we need is more medical help. We can't do operations because we have no power and we don't have a generator, so we're very limited in what we can do.
There are fears the death toll could rise to thousands and questions about whether Indonesia's tsunami early warning system failed. Also tonight, Theresa May calls on the Conservative Party to rally around her Brexit plans. Boris Johnson describes them as deranged. New research suggests young people between the ages of 16 and 24 are lonelier than any other age group. And in the Ryder Cup, Europe cruised to victory over the United States. Good evening. The Indonesian authorities are digging mass graves for hundreds of victims of the earthquake and tsunami that hit the island of Sulawesi on Friday. The death toll currently stands at over 800, but officials are warning thousands may have perished. Well, the quake, with a magnitude of 7.5, struck to the north of the island, and it was followed by deadly tsunami along the coast. The closest town to the epicentre is the heavily populated fishing area of Donggala, with over 300,000 people. Rescuers have yet to reach it. Further south, in the city of Palu, over 820 people have now been confirmed dead. Our correspondent, Rebecca Henschke, is there.
Up to 50 people are believed to be still under the rubble of the Roa Roa Hotel here in Palu City. Rescue workers are trying to find survivors. With no heavy building equipment available, they're using whatever they have. Cries of help had been heard from the rubble, but in this case it came too late.
Looking at the conditions there are still bodies unidentified as well as victims buried under rubble. There are also remote areas yet to be reached by the search and rescue teams.
President Joko Widodo has visited the area, promising to speed up the aid operation. Hundreds of military personnel have been deployed, and some of the most vulnerable are getting help. But those left behind are struggling. And with aid only now just trickling in, desperate residents are taking matters into their own hands.
We need to eat. We don't have any other choice. We must get food.
We're in a crisis. We have nothing for our basic needs. Food, water, we desperately need them.
Desperate relatives are flocking to the area to try to find out the fate of loved ones. But as supplies run out, many haven't made it. People have been waiting for hours for petrol since this morning. They've come this way trying to reach the affected area of Palu to find out what's happened to their loved ones. This lady hasn't heard from her son and daughter.
I'm going out of my mind. I don't know where my children are. I'm going crazy with worry about them. I have no news at all.
She still has a long way to go to reach Palu. We arrive after hours waiting for landslides to be cleared. These are the scenes that are greeting people who are able to get through. Rows of rubble along the coastline,
This would have been a thriving fishing village, houses packed closely together next to shops, now reduced to rubble amongst it, cars smashed by the powerful waves, boats turned upside down in amongst the rubble of people's possessions.
The bodies from this area are lined up at the nearby health clinic. Doctors say that in this Muslim-majority country, they will be buried in a mass grave soon to stop the spread of diseases.
They are starting to smell. We want to wait for relatives to pick them up, but we can't wait any longer.
This 5-year-old girl was found alone with a broken leg. She knows her name, but her family is missing and she can't remember where she lived. Doctors are doing what they can to look after her. Rebecca Henschke, BBC News, Palu, Sulawesi.
So what's caused this devastating earthquake and tsunami? Well, Indonesia sits on what is known as the Ring of Fire, an area home to 90% of the world's earthquakes and 75% of its volcanoes. In the last few months, there had been over 30 tremors a day in the region. So did the early warning system fail? Well, our correspondent Richard Lister is here. Richard.
Ben, this ring of fire around the Pacific sees most of the world's seismic activity. There are some 80 geological fault lines running through Indonesia alone. And this one, which triggered Friday's earthquake, is the most active. It runs right through the town of Palu, so people here were well aware of the threat. But this footage shows that even as the waves surged towards Palu, people were still driving along the seafront, either unaware or heedless of the danger. So why did the warning systems fail? A tsunami alarm network was put in place around Indonesia after the devastating tsunami in 2004. The system relies on a series of sensors on the seabed. When a sensor detects an earthquake, it assesses the threat and sends the data to a buoy floating on the surface. That buoy then alerts a satellite, which transmits a warning to officials on the ground. But in 2016, it was revealed that none of Indonesia's warning buoys were working due to damage by fishermen or a lack of maintenance. A replacement system has been delayed by a lack of funding. Other, more basic sensors are still in place, and the authorities say before the waves rolled in, warnings were sent out using sirens and text messages. But the earthquake cut power, disabling sirens and damaging communications towers too. The warnings didn't get through to everyone. What's more, the remaining sensors had picked up a tidal wave of just 6 centimetres, but as it was squeezed by this narrow inlet, that wave grew to a height of up to 6 metres. No one in Palu knew the scale of what was coming until it was too late. Ben.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. Richard Lister reporting. Well, Nick Beek is in the Indonesian capital, Jakarta, from where the aid response to this disaster is now being coordinated, and he's just sent us this update.
This is the military airport where the relief effort is being coordinated, and beyond the security, they're loading up another plane. They're packing it full with the essentials for trying to sustain life: water, food and medicine. They're also putting in equipment for trying to find any more survivors. One thing they don't have, though, is time. This is already a desperate race. Some aid has already been dispatched. We think more will go in the coming hours. Also trying to get to the worst hit areas are those relatives who've heard nothing from their loved ones. We met one man tonight who said his 6-year-old daughter was due to be dancing at a festival on the beach where the tsunami struck. The family car has been found, but his daughter and his wife have not been. And that's just one of many personal stories which is propelling this huge effort.
Nick Beek there in Jakarta. Well, we can now go back to our correspondent Rebecca Henschke, who's in the city of Palu on Sulawesi, where it's going to be dawn pretty soon. And Rebecca, really desperate scenes there.
They are indeed, and people that I'm meeting here are saying that they haven't received any of that promised aid. The houses behind me that have been completely destroyed by the quake, those families are now camping out in tents, salvaging what they could for their homes. But they say they have only limited supplies to last into the coming days, and are breaking down in tears when I ask them about how they're coping. All along this coast road from the left and the right for metres in is all rubble. All these families have fled to higher ground. Those that didn't flee in time were caught up in those waves, and the death toll here is expected to rise. I've been to the hospital near here that's struggling to cope with the injured, and many people are still missing, unable to find their families.
Rebecca, thank you very much indeed. Rebecca Henschke there in Palu. Other news now, and Theresa May has urged the